will actually be the final community meeting for this year. With us today, we have two very familiar faces to the Power BI community. We have Asanka Padmakumara and Gogula Aryalingam. We've got two featured sessions today. The first one will be an introduction to Power BI Datamarts, followed by a session by Gogula on building a single source of truth with Power BI using DirectQuery for Power BI datasets and Azure analysis services. So with that, we've got about 20 attendees, so we can get started. I'd like to hand over. Just one note, this session will be recorded. So if any of you do not wish to be part of a recorded session, now would be the time to leave. Great. With that, I'll hand over to our first speaker, Asanka. But before I do that, I'll just give a quick introduction to him. Asanka is the principal engineer and practice lead engineer at ClearPoint. He is joining us all the way from New Zealand, so it's quite late in the night, and we really appreciate your time, Asanka. He's been working in the industry for over 12 years in BI and data analytics. He's also Microsoft Most Valuable Professional in the data platform category. And he's a tech enthusiast and enjoys sharing his time and knowledge with us. So Asanka, thank you very much for being here. And over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Warren. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining the sessions. It's really good to be back in the Sri Lankan Power BI meetups. This is something that I'm familiar with. I think most of the people who join today's sessions, I know the people in person. Cool. So let me share my screen, and then we can start up the presentation. Right. So hopefully all of you can see the screen. If not, just shout out. All right. So today's session is basically kind of a show and tell for the Power BI Datamarts. It's not a very deep dive or deep technical session. So what I want to do is like show, what's Power BI Datamarts, basically from the point of view of the business users or the business analysis, and where Power BI Datamarts can be used, and why Microsoft thought of introducing something like Power BI Datamarts. Introduction, I think the Warren gave me like a proper introduction better than this one. So again, I'm Asanka Padmakumara. I'm a principal engineer as well as the practice lead for the data engineering and organization called ClearPoint in New Zealand. If you're not connected to my LinkedIn or the Twitter, you can connect me from my LinkedIn, and as well as you can follow me the Twitter so that we can be in contact with and talked about the data analytics. You can go to my LinkedIn. I post the about the data analytics related subjects most of the time. Right. So if you think about an organization, let's just take this scenario. Like we have the business users, and if you think about the discussion between business users and the technical users, the business users are the people who actually know the business or the data within an organization. So they know how an organization works, how the data is generated, what each and every data field represents. Let's come to the business perspective, right? So they can say that I know the data. But the problem is like when they want to analyze the data, when they want to create the report, when they want to see what's happening, what the data is represented, they always have to go to the technical user or someone who's working on the database side, someone who's working on the data analytics or the data warehousing. So even if the business user know the data, he don't know the data warehousing concepts, how to create a data warehouse, or let alone that, write the SQL statement. Okay. On the other hand, the technical user, He knows all the data warehousing concepts, all the tech geek, the technical things, right? It's SQL, Python, but he does not understand the data. So he has to go back to the business user and ask, like, okay, what does this table represent? What does this field represent? How to do the calculation? So there's a knowledge gap between these two when it comes to the data and analyzing the data, right? Keeping that aside, let's understand what is a data warehouse. Okay, if the business user don't know the data warehouse, what is a data warehouse in an organization? So the data warehouse is like, if you think about an organization, each organization have a different department. Like, for example, like an organization can have the accounting department, the sales department, and you have the suppliers, you have the HR department, etc., etc. Right? The previous business user, when he want to do some kind of analysis, what he have to do is like he might have to bring the data across from the multiple systems. So if you have the accounting department using the accounting system, you have to connect the accounting systems, and then you have the sales. Sales has a post system, so ERP systems, all those things, CRM systems. You need to connect to those systems to bring data and do kind of data matching up, cleaning up, do the processing, and do the reporting. So that is where the data warehousing comes to play. So you bring the data from multiple source systems and do, all the consolidations, calculations, store in one place, right? So if you think about the characteristic of a data warehouse, the main purpose of a data warehouse is that you want to use it for the reporting as well as analyzing the data, right? And then you need to have a central repository where you have all the data in one place, right? Which means that you have the multiple systems, but all the systems are connected to the central place where you have the data. That's a functionality of a data warehouse. And it has to be organized as well. Just you can't, the previous business user just can't go there and have to create the reports when the data is everywhere. So it has to be make it like more organized so that anyone can connect and do their reporting. It has to be integrated as well, which means that you cannot expect it to do a one-time data load and there's no interconnection between these systems. The data is not continuously flowing into the system. So you need to make sure that all these systems are interconnected and continuous the data is flowing into your data warehouse. And the whole idea is like it has to be read optimistic as well. So that's what a data warehouse is. That's what the data warehouse functionality of an organization. But that's not for everyone, especially not for the business users. Why it is so? Because the business users or the technical business analysis or the citizen data analysis, they cannot understand the data warehousing concept. But talking about star schemas, talking about surrogate keys, talking about storage changing dimension, etc., which is basically beyond their domain, beyond their knowledge. Okay, it's a technical knowledge. It's not for everyone, so not everyone can do that. And if you have a data warehouse, if you want to analyze the data, you need to write the code. You need to write some kind of SQL statement, Python, Scala, or with different kind of languages to get the insight of your data. Not everyone process that technical expertise to do that, especially when it comes to business. And then you have to spend on capex. Basically, you need to spend on hardware or software if you want to build a data warehouse to do analysis. So if you think about like I have a department and I have my department data, I know my source system, I know my files, Excel files, target files, and everything. Now that if I want to analyze it, do I have to go to maybe a cloud platform, or maybe you want to install SQL servers, and then I had to create a data warehouse and then dump those data in. These things, involve cost and capex to initial cost to do everything. Not everyone can afford to do that, especially in a business user perspective, right? And you have to put a lot of effort and time. So all these business and semi-technical users, their main job is not to create the reports. They have to do, analyze the information. They have to create the report as part of their business, as part of their day-to-day work, but that's not the only thing they do. So they can't put, 100% or the 90% of effort to, consolidate this data, clean up this data, and create a proper data mart. Okay. So it takes a lot of time. You basically have to put a lot of effort into so. And then once you do that, which means that you might have to maintain this thing. It's not a one-time thing. You might have to create this report next week or the following month. So you need to maintain this pipeline to make sure that the data is continuously flow if you build something like that. And then not only that, if something goes wrong, you need to, how to monitor this one, and you need to, do the notifications if something goes to the business user. So there are so many additional workloads involving if you have to build something like that, you do analyze on your data to create a platform like that. So not everyone can afford to do all those things, especially, spend more time on creating a platform where you can do your analysis, day-to-day analysis and create your report. So that's where the bridge that gap, that is where this Power BI data mask comes to play. So the Power BI data mart is actually announced or introduced in May 2020 as the public preview feature. So still in the public preview, it's not in GA right now. Again, as I said, the whole idea is like to bridge the gap between the IT people and the business users. So, as you remember, so IT people, they have the technical expertise, but they don't know the data. Business users, they know the data, but they don't have the technical expertise to create their own data warehouse or data mart, or basically the place where you can store the data and do the analysis. So what they provide is like you don't have to worry about installing anything or installing software or go to the cloud platform and create a cloud platform. It's basically fully web-based experience. You go to the Power BI service and it's basically it's like you do in Power BI service actually fully web-based. You don't have to have any other tool, right? So low code, no code ETL with the Power Query. Again, you don't have to write queries to bring the data. So the ETL is like extract, transform, load, the part of the data warehousing concept where you would connect to source system, do the transformation, and load to the final destination of the data warehouse. So that's been handled by the Power Query without writing any code. And this is built on top of the fully managed SQL Azure SQL DB. I'll show you in the demo as well how it's been built. So which means that behind the scene, it actually create a kind of a data warehouse for you. You don't see it. If you go to the web experience, you don't see what you are building. You just see like normal Power BI kind of a user experience. But behind the scene, actually, it create a SQL DB and a data warehouse for you. And this is fully managed, as I said, so which means that the performance is automatically tuned. You don't have to worry about, creating indexes and, do the static and all those things. That's been already handled by the Microsoft, sorry, the handled by the Power BI platform. Licensing requirement, this is not available with the Pro. Obviously, because of the costs involved, you need to have SQL DB, you need to have a certain performance or the certain computation power to work on the Power BI data mart. So because of that, this is only available in the premium or the premium per user licensing. Most importantly, this is not a replacement for the enterprise data warehouse. I'll tell you why in the demo as well, but which means that if you think about a large organization which you have like a data warehouse built out of the Synapse or maybe SQL Server or Redshift, Power Query, BigQuery, Snowflake, this is not a replacement for enterprise data warehouse in an organization. Rather, like you can think of like a place where you do the departmental BI or the departmental data analysis for within an organization, not basically an replacement for an organization or data warehousing solution. Okay. The architecture wise, if you think about like we have the different data sources as I mentioned a couple of slides ago. You have the different data sources, different systems within organizations, and we have the Power Query online connecting to these sources, and it actually allows you to the UI or the web interface to connect to these sources using, if you have on-prem, maybe from the gateway. If it's not the cloud, you don't need the gateway. And then you bring the data and you do the mashing up using Power Query, you do the transformations, and then you create the relationships, and the data is dumped into Datamart. So Datamart is, as I said, is again fully managed as a SQL DB and ready for the model, and everything is model, and you just go there and consume the data once the data is dumped into the SQL DB. And on top of that is create auto-generated data set, right? So this generate the data set is again handled from the Microsoft or the Power BI service. So it's as you create a data mart, you will get a default data set along with that one, and this data set is actually directly connected to the SQL DB. And this data set again is get optimized for the performance by the Power BI service. So you don't have to do anything from yourself to cache in, and everything is actually I'll explain the demo as well. So how it happens is it actually caches the data based on the queries that you run for the from the data mart. So that's actually, you can't modify it. It's actually created for you and hand managed by the Power BI service. And the only thing you need to do is, like, once the data mart is created, the data set is created, and you can basically create report based on the data that you use to create the data mart, and then you can do the dashboards as well. Okay. Why would someone or why would anyone basically would use data marts? The first or the important thing is like the departmental data analysis. So which means that you have, maybe you might have a enterprise data warehouse, or maybe you don't. But even if you have a one, sometimes you need to have your own set of requirements that you can't always go for your data warehousing team or the IT team. And I have this Excel sheet, I have this CSV sheet, I got this markup research information from this vendor. Can you push this into the data warehouse? I mean, they can do that, but then again, to accommodate the change like that, bringing a new data source, it takes some time, because they are quite busy with other works as well. They have to do all the other things, security, all those evaluations and everything. The whole process takes time to do a modification to a data warehouse. But if you want to do a ad hoc analysis, you want to see how the new data is working, you want to do an analysis now to see how everything's performing right now. Maybe you don't have to push into the data warehouse, but you need to see how it do right now. In future, if you think that this analysis is worthwhile, you can integrate it to an enterprise data warehouse. But right now, you want to play around it and you create some insight. So that is where the departmental data analysis comes to play for your citizen data scientists or the departmental people. And the data ownership. So if I'm the organization, if I'm the department, I know my data. So if you create your data marts, that I can tell that, okay, I understand this data, I own this data. Whereas, like, if you talked about the enterprise data warehouse, IT team will not take the ownership. Ownership will go back to your product, the department, or the product team. Okay. And the dependency on the IT team become less. So which means that you don't always have to depending on the IT team to do a report, or IT team to do an analysis on your data. And the less workload on the IT team as well, on the other hand, because business users or the multiple people will not always come, hey, I have a new data source I want to integrate. Can you, bring this data into this track table or dimension table into the data warehouse? You don't have to. I mean, those kind of queries. Sorry. If you're talking, if you could just mute yourself. If you have questions, just raise your hand. So yes. Right.
Asanka, there is a question in the chat.
Yeah, I can't see the chat.
From Dilun, what's the difference between data marts and data flow?
Cool. So the data flow and the data marts is what happens is, like, for the data mart is the technology behind the data flow is you actually dump the data into the files, and you can't basically write the queries on top of that. One here is actually the technology behind the data mart is SQL DB, where you can data is stored as your normal data warehousing platform where you can write your queries. And then if you have a tools which basically can connect to SQL DB, so let's say the Tableau or maybe some other platform, some other any tool that which actually can work on top of a SQL DB, you can use on the data mart. So it's kind of, we can tell it's like kind of an advancement on the data flow. And yeah, so that's how I can put it in here with the data marts and the data mart and the data flow. Cool. So the other thing is, like, no additional skills or tools required when it comes to data marts. You don't need to learn you don't need to learn new things. If you know SQL, it comes handy. But even if you don't know the SQL so good, I'll show in the demo as well, where you can write the queries without using SQL in the visual experience. And the reusable data pipelines and data set. Which basically what happens is, like, once you create the data marts, those data pipelines and data sets, you can schedule it, you can configure it, use the incremental refresh, and you don't have to do anything else to make the data is continuously flowing into your data mart, right? Cool. The features on the data mart is comes with the built-in incremental refresh. So if you have like the data set which frequently get updated, you can configure it to set it as the incremental refresh for those tables based on the date and time fields. You have the proactive caching, as I said, like you initially start with the direct query to your data mart that you build, but even that data set become import mode once the after you start querying on that one based on the queries that you write. So you have the proactive caching on your data set. It comes with a row level data security, so you can write the basically row level security onto your data, and you can implement a security layer there. No code query designer, you don't have to know SQL, and if you know SQLs, you can write advanced queries to the SQL, and you have the IntelliSense to query development as well, which means that just like you do in in database platform, you can start using SQL statement on top of your data to do analysis as well if you know the SQL, right? And then you can use Excel to connect your data mart and do the transformations. So basically, you do an analysis on the data you built on the data mart, right? Limitation wise, it does not support calculate columns, so it's calculate tables as of now. And licensing, as I said, is only available the premium and the premium per user licensing. Maximum of 100 GB data set as of now. I think it's going back to the limitations available in the as you see, database. The 100 GB, that's limitation is for the standard pricing, I think, standard layer. Performance wise, it could be, you might see if you start using it now, you might see a little bit of slowness on loading a couple of thousand data into the data mass. I believe that's because of the previous stage. So, but that eventually these things will go away and performance will be improving, because this is not something that Microsoft is gonna implement it and throw it away. Seems like they're kind of this seems like a promising feature and a promising technology when it's come to the Power BI. Cool. Let's quickly jump into the demo. Let me show what I'm going to do. Is like I have created. Let's keep this one as it is. Close this one. I hope you can still see my screen. So what I've opened is like my source system. So I have a SQL Server database, which basically has the worldwide importers data set. So what I'm going to do is, like, as a business user, as a business analyst, I know this is one of my source system. This is basically my invoicing system is there. So I have my invoice line, invoices, as well as I have my sales people, and I have my customers maybe, and I have the maybe the cities and everything. Everything is in there, right? And then as my another source systems, I have the targets coming from Excel sheet. So for each salesperson for each year, I have set up the target. Now that I want to do is, like, I want to create a data mart which I'm going to use for analysis, as well as not only for that, I can do in the future. What I'll do is, like, I will bring more data to my data mart. I will bring more sources and create a one central repository where I have the most of the data I want for my data analysis, right? So starting with that one, I'm going to connect to the Power BI service, right? So I'm going to create a new workspace in here. So let's say that demo as PBI live. So this is my workspace that I'm going to create a data mart, and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to use a premium capacity for this workspace, because, as I said, like, it's only work with the premium or premium per user licensing. And then I'm going to create a new data mart. As you say, you can see it in the preview as a preview feature. So click on this one, and it will it will open up my create data marts UI. Yeah. So it's a similar kind of experience what you have in the have in the Power BI. And as you said, like, if you have the data flow can be an input to the data mart as well. So if you already have a built-in data flow, you can use that data flow to bring that data to your data mart as well. But what I'm going to do is like I'm going to bring the fresh data. So I'm going to go to the get data, and then you will see that there are a heap of sources available, just like you have the Power BI desktop, the kind of family interfaces for you when if you're working with Power BI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select SQL, and my source system is actually Azure SQL DB. So I'm going to click on this one. My source connection is so it should be in this one. Sorry, I'm going to copy this one and put it as my source connection. And because I have already been used this one, it's actually just use the existing connection information. If not, like you can give us the basic authentication and everything. And I'm going to remove this one. Yeah, this one. Get a connect from this connection. So once I connected, it will actually show you all the databases. So my database is worldwide importers, and I'm going to pick a couple of tables to do my transformations and to keep my data set. I'll start with my invoice slide. So once you click on that one, it will give you a preview of your data in the web interface, and you can see my sales invoices and maybe my, let's go for the salesperson. I think the people, this basically has all the information about the salespeople as well as maybe the customers, right? So I'm going to take 4 tables to analyze my invoices with the customers as well as the salespeople, and then invoice header as well as invoice line item. And then I'm going to do is like transform this data. So just basically, I don't want all the data available in this table to be showed in my reports or my Datamarts. We'll start with the people. So I'm going to rename this one as my sales person table, just in here. And then I'm going to only filter out all the other people because it's only salesperson. So I have a flag called is salesperson. So I'm going to do a filtration, say that I just want the salesperson only. And once I do that, you can see that it is running from the SQL DB even right now. So if I select these columns that I only want for my analysis, just a textual one, and I don't want all the unwanted columns, I will keep the let me see. Yeah, not none of this field required for me. So I'm going to click on this one and remove other columns. So I'm going to keep the textual fields that required for my analysis. I'm going to do the same for the sales customers as well. So I'm going to do the customers, customer names, and this IDs doesn't make any sense to me for my analysis, even for my future analysis. But I'm going to keep some of the information around, like my postal codes or delivery address, and yeah, that should be good enough for me. Is there any important information for my analysis? Doesn't seems to be like that. Maybe credit limit if I want to for my customer. And yeah, all right. And I'm going to remove the other columns. So the similar. Did I do something wrong? That's a customer ID, customer name. Yeah, that should be okay. I remove I think a lot of other columns as well, but that's good. So again, what I want to show is like the similar experience that you have in the Power BI desktop, or the if you're doing the Power Flow, it is a similar Power Query online experience. Right. So sales invoice line. I have again so many fields, but I think let's keep everything as it is for the sales invoice line. Let's go to sales invoices, or the invoice header table. Okay, so I have all these tables, but for this one, I think I'm going to remove certain columns like delivery instructions. I don't want this one. Let's go in here. I don't want these textual fields. Doesn't make any sense for my analysis. Just take more time to do the processing. That's it. Yep. For the items, maybe not the comments. So I'm going to remove both these columns and the comments as well, just to keep my table size smaller. Like Cool. So I bring the sales persons, customers, invoice line, and invoices. The next thing what I'm going to do is like I actually want to bring my target information as well. The target is not in the same table that I selected, so it's in this Excel sheet. So what I'm going to do is like I'm going to select Excel workbook, and then I'm going to upload this Excel because it's in my local machine, right? So I'm going to select my sales target. So it will be actually uploaded into SharePoint online, and then maybe if you want, you can do a refresh. You can actually do the refresh. If you click on this one, you can see the copy of the URL actually go for the SharePoint online once you upload a file. Okay, right. So I get my target information as a file upload. Right. So this is my target sheet. It will have the target for each salesperson for each year and the target value. And I'm going to create this one. Right. So I'm going to rename it as the sales target. Right. I'm going to save this one. So basically, I'm saving all the changes I've done in the Power Query Online versions to do all the transformations, data cleaning, and everything I did. Okay. Yeah. So once I'm saving this one, so it will start do the Power Query processing, and go back to source systems, and do all the transformations and everything I written or I did in the Power Query Online, and then you try to create the relationship. If you have the relationship, can be defined based on the information that I provided. If it's basically it can't, you might have to you basically will have to define the relationship in this area or this window where you can do all the relationship mapping and everything. Okay. So you can see that the data is actually being loading now. So this is where the data loading comes to play to your SQL DB or your Datamarts behind the scene. Click some 10. So you have 60,000 sales invoice lines are loaded, and 40,000 invoices. It's being loaded right now. We'll give a couple of minutes to load everything. Or I can't see the chat. If you have any questions, just when we have a break, just let me know.
Sure, Asanka, nothing on the chat at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Good. Right. So it's still being loaded. Like I said, like, because it's in the premium and maybe it's because of the, capacity as well, it take a little time to, do all the data loading. Still for like 200,000 records. It takes some time. So I think, yes, all the invoice lines and everything's loaded now. That now is, creating all the relationships and everything and trying to push the data to the behind the scene database. Let's give a couple of minutes to work sometimes. I mean, it's funny as well because sometimes it's quite fast. So if I was creating this one just a moment ago to see if things work perfectly fine, and this was quite fast. Now when I do it the live demo, this step sometimes takes some time. So yeah, finally this comes up. So this is where you actually do other set of works in your transformation, or you write the queries and do all the analysis and all the other create the reports as well. So what I didn't do in the previous step is I didn't create the relationship. That's what I'm going to do in here. So if you go in the bottom, you can see that there's a relationship for the model window. A similar kind of a view for the Power BI desktop where you have the multiple tables and you can drag and drop and create a relationship. So that's what I'm going to do here. So starting with the invoice line. So I have the invoice line and the invoice. So it's been linked from the invoice ID. So I have the invoice going here, the invoice ID here, invoice ID here. So I'm going to drag and drop the invoice ID to create the relationship. So the invoice line has a many and the invoice has a one. So it's a many to one relationship. I can confirm that one. So invoice is coming to this one, and the salesperson is coming from this one. So you have the salesperson ID here to salesperson ID here. So salesperson has a one-to-many relationship, so I'm going to change it to that one. Just create a new relationship between these two, and then you have the sales customer again in this table, so you can create the relationship between these two. So you have the sales customers one-to-many relationship. Sorry, yeah. And then the target. The target is okay. Now, one thing I actually the problem I have is like I have the target against the year, whereas like the sales invoices against the date. So what I have to do is like I have to create a similar kind of, or I have to create a link between sales invoices on the sales target, but I don't have the similar information. So what I have to do is like I might have to go back and create a new date dimension or kind of date field. For that, I can go back. I can go to the transformation section, and then you will transform data. So which basically again going back to my previous editor. And then what I'm going to do is like I'm going to go to the invoice table, right, and create basically a duplicate of this one. So same thing, similar things what we do in Power BI desktop as well. And I'm going to remove changes as a date for this one, and I'm going to only take the invoice date and remove all the other things. So right click and remove other columns. So I have my date column in here. And then I'm going to get transform data and get the year, right? So I have the invoice day for this one. Oh, sorry, I should want to keep the date as well as the invoice day. So I'm going to duplicate this one. Going to duplicate, and I'm going to make this one as my year column so that I can connect it with my basically what do you call it, target. So this one is my year, and I'm going to check this one as my date. Right. And if you want like month analysis as well, this similar kind of thing. One thing I actually forgot to do is like I'm going to remove the duplicates. So remove the duplicates of this one so that it only have the unique dates only, right? And then maybe I'm gonna do the duplicate of this column and get the month as well, just in case like if I want to do month-wise analysis, right? Yeah. And then change to the transformation to just to get the month name. Name of the month. Okay. So I just, without doing anything, I just using the Power Query to create my own date dimensions as well, or the date field to do analysis across the multiple other tables as well. Let's go back and save this one. Hopefully it wouldn't take time for same time again. So it's actually, let's see what happens, whether it's load everything again or just load changes I did for the date dimension on the new table that I created. Yeah, it does not load any other data set that I actually created. It's because it's all been loaded. It's nothing's loading again. It's just only loading the data for the date. So it's quite faster now. Right. So let's go back in here. What does it say? So you have the date, you have the invoice. Invoice line is connected to invoice ID. Okay. So this person is connected to this person ID. Customer is connected to highlighting. Let me zoom in just for a sec. And then what I'm going to do is like I'm just going to connect this one from the invoice date to invoice date. Come on. Sorry. So invoice date. Annoying. Why it is giving me an error? Oh, come on, it scrolls up. State to inverse state relationships, you have a 1-to-many relationship. And then I can connect from the year to here as well, the relationship between date and here. And the date has the 1-to-many relationship in here as well. And I can create the relationship between salesperson to person with the full name as well. So the full name, this one is get connected to here. So the salesperson has one to this in the target. Yeah, cool. So what I can do is like, so see the data. So you can see the date, you can see the sales customers and sales invoices, and everything is loaded into my data mart. So as a business user, once data has been loaded, you can start writing query against your data set that you develop. If you know the SQL, you can basically go in here to this query panel and you can start writing SQL. For example, like you can say that again, since it comes with the, as I said, it comes with the IntelliSense as well, just like any just like the SSMS, and it's actually fetching the metadata from the data mart that you created. For example, like select, start from, and maybe I start with the sales invoice. So, okay, sales invoice. Yes. Join metrics. Let's see whether we can do that. Sales person on S dot. Yeah, it's the simple sense is sometimes it works very smoothly. Sometimes it doesn't give you the field information, everything. In this case, like I can't, see the proper IntelliSense because maybe it could be the, yeah, sorry, it could be the, because the preview feature is still working on this. But what I'm going to do is like, I'm going to, copy and paste the previous query that I generated just for the interest of time. Let's go in here. So this is the query that I've built. So what basically does is like it actually connect to the sales invoice tables and do a left arrow join with my salesperson table, and using the salesperson ID that I defined, and then I'm going to get the grouping of the basically normal SQL statement for bringing the totals, chill items, and total dry items. And I can run this query on top of the data that I basically built, will basically bring from the Datamarts. So just like you do in normal SQL Server, any queries that you write to the SQL Server, you can do that. But if you're using who don't have the familiarity of the SQL Server, you can do the same thing in visual queries as well. So for the visual query, what you have to do is like you can drag a table here, just like you do the sales invoices. You drag a table for the sales invoices, and then you drag the sales, for the salesperson. And then what you do is like you can merge these two. You can say that I'm going to merge these two from the sales invoice merge with the sales. Sorry, did I drag to this one? No, salesperson here. Just added the sales invoices, salesperson. I'm going to combine these two using the you know salesperson key. So I can say that the salesperson ID from the sales invoice is linked to the person ID, the salesperson, using the left outer join, and then it can give you an estimate that okay, this is working. The join has kind of working without an issue. There are matching between these two, right? And then uh, it will give you an information about this. Whenever you do a step, you can see the information. So the join steps and outcome of this join step, and then you can expand it in here and see that the salesperson against each invoice line. And whenever you do a transformation in the bottom section, it adds a step in the top section as well. This works really nice in that manner. And then you can select the full name and then a few words, total dry item and total chill items. And I'm gonna, remove all the other things. Similar, you have the Power Query. You can remove other columns. You can get it here. So it will add a step in the top as well. And then if you want, you can define the aggregations as well. Right click on this one and you can say the group by, and you can do that. I want to have the advanced group by for the sum of sure, and I can say that I want to get the sum chiller items and add another one for like some of what do you call it dry, and they're going to get in here some of the dry items, and it basically give a similar outcome, and you can see you can get the highlight query, and you can share it this one. You can have the duplicate these things. You can do all those things that you write in SQL. If you don't know the SQL, you can use the UI experience to write the query on top of the data program that you built, and you can open it in the Excel if you want. So this is basically to create your data warehouse, create your data mart, and write the queries, do an analysis then and there in the web experience, right? And then once you do that, if you go back to the workspaces, you see that this is the data mart that you created. So whatever the step you do is actually get saved to instantly. You don't have save button. Whatever changes you do is get saved in the data mart. And as you see, it's been created a data set, and the data set has something called default. This is not something that you normally get in like when you create another data set in the Power BI, it doesn't have a default. So this one says that it's a data set, but it comes with the default, which means that this is the data set associated with your data mart. So when you want to create the report, you can go to the data set that is automatically generated, and then you can go and you can create the report. So it has all the information that available in your data mart. If you want to create a chart, similar things like, you can get your sales amount, or you can get your invoices amount. For example, you can get the quantities, and then you can get the same sales person information against the quantity, and then you can visualize in here, right? Just like this. So you can visualize this information in your Power BI as well, and you can save in the Power BI. So what happens is, like, initially this actually connect to directly as a direct query to your data mart, but eventually what happens is the Power BI service, it make it like the import mode to as using the proactive cache. So it will not give you, it will not go to the database, the data mart that you created every time when you write the query. Okay, so but initially start with the direct query. Okay. Now, the next step is I'm going to show you like what happened behind the scene when you create the data mart. For that one, I'm going to save this one as it is, as my report that I just created. And I'm going to go back to my data mart, which is this one. I'm going to go to properties and then go to settings. Under the data mart settings, you have these server settings, right? So this has the connection information. What I'm going to do is, like, I'm going to copy this connection information and go to the SSMS and paste that connection information. I'm going to use my Windows or the Power BI authentication, which, let me see, can't remember the thing I put in here. Yeah. So I'm going to use my Power BI server login to connect to this server behind the scene. Yeah. So close this one. So what happens is, like, they actually connect to us Azure SQL DB, which backed by that with this Power BI data mart that we created. It's just like any other database that you see. So you can see the server, you can see the database. So it comes as a DB, Power BI, prodnum, and the date that you created, and kind of a URL generated from the Power BI with as the database name, and you can see all the artifacts. Basically not all the artifacts. I'll show you what are the artifacts you can see. So if you expand the tables, you will not see any tables, because tables are basically hidden from the business users or the people who from the end users. You can't see all the tables are generated. But what happens is, like, on top of the tables, you can see the views, where you can actually write the queries using any tools that actually support the normal SQL. So, for example, like, you can right click on the salesperson and see the top 100 rows, and anything you can do in your SQL statement, you can do it in your this DB as well. So if you have another tool which works against in a SQL Server database, you can use that tools to connect to this data marts that you created from your Power BI service and do any other analysis as well. So you can see that you can write the SQL statement, you can write the joins and everything, and yeah, so you can do the analysis here as well if you have like a complex SQL queries that already been developed. So someone else developed for you, right? Cool. So that's pretty much it for the demo. If you have any questions, now is the time. And if we have a bit of a reading materials available on, from the why was the data mass and why you should get data mass, why you shouldn't use data mass and everything. I'll share these slides with you. You can copy this link and go to these URLs to understand or to learn more on the Power BI data mass.
Asanka, we have a question in the chat. Do we need to install a gateway in the SQL Server machine to connect to a data mart?
So I think it's kind of a similar experience as the Power BI. If your data source is on-prem, you need to have a gateway, connect to the Datamarts. So if the server is online, like Azure SQL DB or like a basically cloud provider, you don't need to have the gateway, but it's an on-prem one. You need to have a gateway, just like the Power BI.
And there's another question from Dilum asking, can you write DAX queries?
Yeah, so you can write the DAX queries as well. So for example, like let me quickly question, like if you want to create a kind of a measure in here, you can actually create a new measure, and the new measure is actually using the DAX queries to create the measure. So if you go in here, it might have go in here, sorry. So go to the new measures. That is actually use DAX queries, that syntax to write the query. So you can get the sum of let's get the sales amount, line profit, and then you actually create the measures for you, and then you can do the analyze on that measures. If you go in here to the sales invoice, created, already created. Yeah, so the measures going within the budget. I create a column. Let's see. That's what it's saved. Yeah, the basic idea is like you can write the DAX queries and you can do the analysis on the measures that you create from the DAX, the Datamarts. Yep. Any questions?
Any other questions?
Yeah, Asanka, I have a couple actually.
Yeah.
So this is related to Dilum's first question. Can we now consider Datamarts as a replacement for Power BI datasets?
Good question. I don't think so. I think the use of a couple of things, like when it comes to the Power BI Datamarts, the main problem is like it's not supported for everyone. It's supported only for the premium licensing and the premium for user licensing, whereas like Datamarts is for everyone. That's one thing. The other thing is like the what's the use case that we actually try to put forward for the data mart is the data flows is basically if you want to use the data only in the Power BI, where you bring the data from multiple things and then you reuse it on top of your other data set to create multiple data sets, kind of landing area to your data. But the data mart is different, where you actually do your analysis on multiple data and you do your actual analysis there. So it's a different use cases when it comes to data flow as well as the data mart, from my understanding or from how I see it. Because the data flow you create is basically as a landing area to your Power BI data set and do the analysis. And you can bring all the data and you bring multiple data sources and as much as you want. But for the data flow, the data mart is basically you create a kind of data repository where you do the analysis on the data, as well as you can extend beyond that. You don't have to solely depend on the Power BI. You can use the other tools as well to use. It's a kind of like sub or the smaller data warehouse for your department. You can use any other tools as well. So it's not exactly a replacement, but there are some similarities as well when it comes to data flow. But main thing I see is like that not everyone can use data mart.
Yes. Yeah, I think I need to think about it as well, because I know that I don't think you can create hierarchies and stuff like that, right?
I haven't tried it out, but I think but maybe because one thing is like I don't think you can edit your data set as well. So if you create your own data set on top of a data mart, maybe you can do that, but I haven't tried it out. I think it shouldn't be a problem. I don't know. I haven't tried it out, but I don't see a reason why it's being blocked or why you can't do that, because at the end it's just another data source.
Right. And then there's another question from Dilum. He says he asks, Datamarts can replace Power BI desktop, right? I mean, to a certain degree.
Yeah, but I think this is a different thing. I know that there are similarities between these offerings, but I think the Power BI desktop is where you actually create all the reports. I mean, again, Power BI is actually offer you pretty much everything that's offered in the Power BI desktop in the service as well, which means that in the future you will be able to do data modeling in the service as well, but not right now. So you still need the Power BI desktop to do the data modeling, bring in certain data and create your visualizations here. But the data mart is not exactly the replacement for the Power BI desktop. Power BI desktop will still be there to do the visualizations and do the advanced modeling and everything.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I also feel now when Power BI Datamarts was released or when it was announced, there's a lot of confusion amongst the community. Where do I use it? It's even if you have premium license, there are a lot of overlaps between data sets, data marts, and data flows.
Yeah. So I think what happened was like because the I think it could be a couple of things. Like if you use the data flow, it's actually backed by the file system from the data lake. So you can't actually, use normal SQL to write the queries. Whereas like people or the most of the people are kind of, familiar with the SQL interfaces, backed by the SQL DB and the performance as well. So they want to, use the performance or the computation of the SQL DB. For example, like if you think about the data marts, the computation is not inbuilt to that one. It still uses the computation of the Power Query to bring the data, do the console data and everything. But on the other hand, like if you think about the Power BI data marts, the data mart itself have their own computation backed by the SQL DB. So they expect would be like more performance and maybe they might have like a future plans to bring in more component to this one and bring your own. Let's say that if this comes with a bring your own SQL Server DB, which means that this could be a interface where people actually can create a small data warehouse for small to medium, this basically a small organization where you can use everything in the Power Query editor to create your data warehouse, create your ETL, and then you don't need to have a data warehouse or like, I mean, it's not still in this stage, but if you think about the small organization where you can't afford to have your data warehousing, you can't afford to have a people working out your the ETL and pipeline. This, if you develop it at that level, you can have your data warehouse itself inside the Power BI, backed by the SQL Server DB.
Right. So Microsoft gives these different options. I think it's depending on your need, you use the right ones to build your architecture.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of just thinking of each of those as replacements for each other, rather they supplement each other or complement each other in certain areas, and sometimes they can be replaced by the other for certain scenarios. So I think depending on the strategy that you're using for your organization and the requirements that you have at that time and the requirements that you have for the future, you need to choose the right options that Power BI gives to build the right architecture, I presume.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many overlaps between these options and offerings. As you said, like one offerings can have similarities, but also give you something that's not provided by the other one. For example, like if you go to the Power Query, data flow, you can't write queries. You can't. You can't do all those other things that you do in the Power BI data mart. So the same thing. So and same goes to the Power BI desktop as well. You can create the measures, you can create the visualizations, and everything can be done in the Power BI service as well. So there are similarities, but there are differences as well. You just want to understand the similarities and differences, and you should know when to use it based on that.
Yep. But that's all questions I have.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I think that's pretty much it then. I think thank you very much everyone for joining the sessions. This is good to be back with you guys, and it's up to you who are now.
In the interest of time, let's actually move on. If you have any questions, you can please drop them in the chat. Thank you very much, Asanka. We know it's quite late over there where you are, so thank you very much for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us. With that, we'll move on to our next speaker. Gogula. For those of you who do not know him, Gogula is the AVP for data analytics at Fortude. He's a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional, Microsoft Certified Trainer, and a Microsoft Certified Solutions Expert. He's also the organizer of the Sri Lanka Power BI data community. And he will be talking to us on building a single source of truth with Power BI using DirectQuery for Power BI datasets and analysis services. Gogula, over to you. Gogula, you're on mute.
Sorry, thanks, Varun. That's quite a long title we have there for a session here. Building a single source of truth with Power BI using DirectQuery for PBI datasets and analysis services. That's because the last portion there, the bolded player section, is in itself the name of the function or the feature that we're going to use, DirectQuery for PBI datasets and analysis services. Because Microsoft couldn't come up with a much simpler name for it. It's still in preview, so probably they might have a better name for it. Asanka, will he be there towards until the end of the session, or will he be dropping off?
I'll have a drop off. Google has already one name here.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, Asanka.
Yeah.
So I'll just skip through this slide. Warren already gave everyone an introduction. So let's take a little look at the background when we talk about a single source of truth. So now when an organization, they need to go ahead with a BI strategy, there are 3 strategies that Microsoft recommends that they use. Okay, that you see at the top here labeled 1, 2, and 3. And using these strategies, you can come up with a mechanism for setting up your BI, your enterprise BI infrastructure, systems, teams if necessary, and all of that. Okay. Now, the single source of truth that we're going to talk about is also it stems out of having a strategy for your analytics. Okay. And out of that one, there is a concept called discipline at the core and flexibility at the edge. Okay. Now, this is also the same thing as the managed self-service BI option that you saw in the previous slide. So there are 3 main strategies that Microsoft talks about. This is strategy number 2. And this is the dominant strategy that Microsoft itself uses within Microsoft for their own internal analytics. Okay, and it's also a personal favorite of mine because it's easier to onboard customers with this approach, because with this approach we can build something, build a standard or a core piece of analytics, and then get our customers to jump into using it and help. So it helps with adoption quite a lot. So it's somewhat like the middle path that you take between extreme self-service BI and enterprise BI. So it's the middle path. And what I found is that this is quite easy to get customers on board. So that's why I'm going to talk about discipline at the core and flexibility at the edge. Right? So if I were to dive deeper into that one, into managed self-service BI, at the core you have 3 things. You have a single master data source. Right? So when you say a single master data source, this is where data from the different systems are brought into one place, and then they're consolidated and structured to a certain degree. Okay. Now, a lot of organizations use a data lake for this purpose. They use a data lake, and sometimes a data warehouse is also used. But ideally, you need to have one place where all of the data is gathered, and it's not just left as a dumping ground for data. It's where you bring in and dump the data, and then also you put some structure on top of your data. So that's just one single place for all of your data, right? So that's the beginning of the single source of truth. And then on top of that, you apply standard corporate BI, which means you are taking the data from the single master source and you are structuring that into standard analytics for the organization. So what we're talking about here are, from a technical perspective, star schemas, right? But for the entire organization. So this could be, let's say, if you take sales, you'll have a bunch of sales fact tables, which has all of the facts that are used to analyze sales, right? Like the sales amount, the quantity sold, and things like that, put into a fact table, and all related dimensions created along with that. And alongside that, we'll have all of the financial or the finance fact tables. So you're talking about an enterprise data warehouse here, where you take the data from a single source and then you structure that into into standard analytics for the entire organization. Okay, so a lot of organizations use data warehouses for this, but in the recent past, we've seen the data lake house getting a lot of traction. So the single master data source and the corporate BI are in one place. It's one solution that handles all of this. And then along with that, you need to have consistent taxonomies, which means consistent standard definitions and calculations for the KPIs and the business measures that are used in the organization. For example, if we have, let's say, sales against targets or sales performance as a KPI, sales performance should be standard across all of the different regions, different departments, and things like that. Again, the same applies to the different business measures that are used in the organization. So that's where the standard taxonomies also comes into play. So these three things put together makes up that core. And this core is usually handled by a specialized team, right? And technology-wise, if you're looking at it, Power BI comes into play at this at the standard corporate BI level and at the consistent taxonomies level. So imagine Power BI models, which has standard BI measures and also standard KPIs, okay, all created for different departments and so forth, okay, which is running on top of a data lakehouse. Okay. And this is, since this is all standardized, like I said, and taken care of by a central team in a lot of cases, okay, that's where this discipline at the core comes into play, because a lot of rigor and standards are put into it. And then once that is done, when you say flexibility at the edge, this is where the departments come in. They use the standard corporate BI to do their own dashboards, reports, and things like that. And importantly, they also get to extend on the data models that are there inside the standard corporate BI. For example, let's say there is a standard corporate sales model which has 15 standard KPIs and about 40 standard business measures, right? What departments can do is they can extend on top of that by adding their own measures and KPIs and having their own departmental BI on top of that. Okay, so this way, a lot of clutter is reduced, because you have all of the standard in one place and you just have to extend on top of that and keep going, rather than having multiple different copies of models across the organization. Then a little bit more background. Like I mentioned earlier, star schemas are quite important if you're going to set up a single source of truth, because at the core of the standard corporate BI, also in your warehouse, you will have these fact tables and dimension tables in a star schema form. Okay, so this provides the performance that's needed, and it provides different ways of analyzing the data. So that's a little background, and let me just quickly jump into a demo here to show you what we have, right? Okay. So that is something that I built. Let me open up my Power BI. Okay, so this is my Power BI service, right? So when I go in here, As part of my discipline at the core, okay, let's assume I have my data warehouse, I have my data lake. On top of my warehouse, I have these models that I built, right? So these are my core models. So I have a model for finance, a model for internet sales, or let's say, let's just get rid of this. I don't want this. I've not even done this yet. Okay. So I have internet sales, I have reseller sales, two separate models. Both are core models, so the core KPIs are inside this. If I were to open one of them, I have these different measures and KPIs. I have product and the calendar using which I do my analysis. A very simple one. Okay. And if I were to go into reseller sales, similar case, right? I have my KPIs and measures for reseller sales. I have 3 dimensions here. The other one had 2. Okay. And these are my core. So if I ever want to create a report, I just start creating a report directly on top of this. Okay. Let's just hope this one generates a report very quickly. So this is a report that was created on top of this model. So different users can come in, use the core model that I have. This is the reseller sales model, and build my own dashboard. And they can build different types of dashboards. Okay, right. Now, what happens is, I have 2 here, right? Let's say now the requirement has come for finance, and since I have standard for BI inside my data warehouse, I need to surface that to the users through a finance model, right? So let me open up the finance model that I have built so far. So I have this finance model that I've built. I have linked to my data warehouse. I have brought in finance. There's a finance fact table. I have 4 dimensions, right? And now I realize that I have a date key, which means I need to bring my calendar also in, right? So I'll just go in, not in there. Try to get data from my data warehouse. I think I already have a connection. Yeah, that's this one. Okay. And my calendar. That's the wrong one, is it? It's date, right? So dim date. And I'm going to bring that dimension in now. Okay, I'm going to import it. Now, the issue here is I'm bringing in dim date. And now what I have to do is I need to go through this table, and then I have to start formatting it, removing the columns that I don't need, creating the hierarchies, creating any additional columns that I might want to create, right? Like the semester column and the quarter column, because I only have the semester number and the quarter number, because I mean, this is all that the data warehouse gives me, right? But then if I think back at the single source of truth, right? If I'm going to create my dimension table, of course, it is coming from my data warehouse, single source, right? But I'm going to create a calendar dimension here, right? But this calendar dimension may not look exactly like the calendar dimension that I have inside my reseller sales and my internet sales model, right? So which means if at all at one point I need to do analysis across finance and sales, I will come, there'll be a dilemma for me. Okay, the calendars are not the same calendars, they look different, right? Or let's say one analysis using reseller sales, and they are very familiar with the calendar table and they do the analysis. Now what I will have to do is to ensure that it's the same, I need to go and open up the code for internet sales, right? Because I have to make sure that all of my calendar dimensions are exactly the same. They should look the same. Okay? So for it to look the same, I need to go into one that I already have. Okay? So which is this one. This doesn't even have the calendar. It has all the wrong ones. Okay. Sorry, this one. And so there's a calendar here, right? So what I'll need to do is go into the calendars code, right? I will have to go to the advanced editor. Let me copy this code. Copy that. Okay, and then I have to maybe just put it into a notepad before we paste it. Then I go back, I close this. I go back to, that's my finance. My finance is here. I go into blank query. So you see that there's a lot of things I have to do here. And so I copy the code. Now this is coming from Intellint sales. I can call this calendar. Yes, I got my calendar, right? Setting date also. Just forget it. Let's say I don't take this in. Calendar. Right. Now I have to go, I have to make sure that I take off the aggregates on this. I have to make sure I have to create the hierarchies here. I have to make sure I need to create the calculated columns that I have. So a lot of different things I have to do. And in case I have to go and make a change in reseller sales calendar table or Intellint sales calendar table, I have to come here and do the same thing here to ensure it's consistent. So you see what the problem is here, right? So even though you have a single source of, say, a data warehouse as part of a single source of truth, when you start creating multiple models, you have to do the same thing over and over again across these models. Okay, so that is where this functionality comes into play. DirectQuery for PBI datasets and analysis services. Okay, so what we do with this is let me just take you to this functionality. Okay, so you have a data warehouse and you have a data model, a sales model built out of that, and you have reports being generated or reports created on top of that model. Right? And then let's say you need to have budgets, right, which is an Excel file, and you want to include budgets into that sales. Right? So what you can do with this functionality is that you can extend the sales model. That means you can create a new model which pulls in everything from the sales model. Plus, you can add more stuff into it, like your budget data from the Excel file, and create another model. Right. So what we are doing is we are not duplicating the work that is done here. We're just using everything inside that. So we are pulling in everything that we want from there, add whatever we want, and have our own model. Right. So which means if we have to do or use sales for 5 or 6 other models, you don't copy those models and work on top of them. You just extend them, and that is what DirectQuery for PBI datasets and analysis services provides. Right. So this is a function or a feature that has that is still in preview. It has been in preview for more than a year, but they've been adding more and more functionality to it. And if you want to enable this feature in Power BI Desktop, you need to go into the preview features section and enable DirectQuery for PBI datasets and AS. Okay. So quite a long name for that feature. Hopefully, they'll have a better name for it when they make it generally available. And not just extending from Power BI datasets, you can also extend from Azure Analysis Services and also with the latest SQL Server 2022 Analysis Services also. But I don't think you can use older on-premises SQL Server models, or you can't extend from those. Okay. So what this feature gives you is that it helps reduce clutter, which means you don't have to create copies of your models. You will create a model and then start extending on top of it. Okay. And you can also keep chaining. So chaining means you create a model and then from that model you create another model, and on top of that model you create a third model and so forth. Okay. The only issue is currently you can have only 3 levels in the chain as part of a preview. Right? If you try to create a 4th one, it will not allow you. But hopefully, once it goes into general availability, they will lift that restriction of chaining. Right? And because of this, you can easily manage and govern your data sets. So you don't have to figure out, okay, which data set has the correct measures or the correct dimensions that you want to publish for everybody to use, right? Because you know it's linked. That way, you know, you can easily manage and govern it. And because of that, the discipline at the core and flexibility at the edge gets a lot of support due to this functionality. Because again, you're not repeating things. Okay. So let me take you through the demo of how this can be done. Okay. Once again, let me go to this one. So let's discard this. And let me, before that, show you. So you need to plan a little bit, right? So one good way of planning is putting up a bus matrix or enterprise bus matrix, which has the different business processes that you need to list down on the left-hand side. So usually a business process gets converted into a fact table or a bunch of fact tables, and sometimes into a and into a model, right? Sometimes 2 of these can become 1 model. Sometimes you can have separate models for each of these business processes. Usually each of them has at least 1 fact table that it can map to, sometimes multiple fact tables, and then you have the dimensions. Right. So we have internet sales and reseller sales. You saw in my demo that they there are 2 data sets or 2 models for them, right? And you can see that date is there for both, and finance also has date in it. Product is there in both of these, and even inventory will have that. Okay, but since I'm not going to work with inventory now, I'll just mark it into. Again, salesperson is there in 2 separate business processes, right? So now I know when I look at it like this, some of these dimensions are going to be part of multiple data sets. So these are good candidates for being split out or pulled out. Okay. Now if I take these dimensions here, they are only they are for finance. So there is no point, you know, you still can, right? But because you need to plan it out. But at the current, as at current, I can leave these out, and I'm going to focus on these 3. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out salesperson, product, and date from those existing data sets, and I'm going to create a separate data set only for these dimensions, right? So what I would do is open up new desktop. We get data. And I have my database is on, or my data warehouse is on SQL Server. It's what SQL Server database. Just that I need to find out what the connection name is. I think I had the name somewhere. That's the name. So and my data warehouse, and I'm going to connect to let's say dim product. I also see that dim product has 3 more tables in the source data warehouse, right? So I'm going to choose all of that. I also have calendar, which is dim date, and then I have one more, which is salesperson, right? That's the employee. So these 3, I'm going to bring in here, and I'm going to start transforming them. Okay, but since so in the interest of time, I don't want to spend showing you how to transform data, right? That's a topic for a different day, and I know a lot of you know how to do that. But what I'm planning on doing is combining these 3 into one dimension called product, this one into calendar, and this one into salesperson. Okay. So I already have one created here. So what I have done is, this is the end result of this demo. So if I were to convert or transform or change those 5 dimension tables into 5 dimensions in Power BI, this is what I'll have. I have calendar, product, and sales. So product has the category and subcategory all brought in here, and salesperson. And I have this one dimension, one data set with 3 of these dimensions. So this is going to be called the core dimensions data set. It is going to have nothing but the dimensions that are going to be used multiple times in different in multiple models. Okay, right. So then what I will do is I will open up my, let's say, finance, right? This is the one I was working with earlier, which I showed you previously, which does not have a calendar, which I tried creating a calendar for from scratch. I am going to get rid of the calendar which I created from scratch. And what I will do now is get data, and I'll choose Power BI datasets. Right? And I have my core. Do I have my core? No. So let me go to the core. Let me publish this. And so I have a core models workspace. I'll publish to my core models workspace. And then that's it just got published there. Okay, so now if I were to go back, and once again go back to my finance analytics and get data from Power BI datasets, I have my 4 dimensions there. I'll connect to that one. So I'm inside a data set that I'm building. I'm connecting to the data set, and I'll select calendar. And it usually gives this potential secret risk because it's data from a different place that's coming in, getting joined here. See, we have this. So it comes in, right? It comes in with whatever that has been built on top, including the hierarchies and so forth, right? And whatever that needs to be hidden are hidden. So it's just a pre-built dimension table for me. All I need to do is connect it. Okay, and then I'm good to use, right? So similarly, if I were to do the same for internet sales and reseller sales, and so I already have that pre-created. So I'm opening internet sales the proper version. This one has, I go in here to model, calendar, product, taken from core. As you can see the little blue line there. And similarly, reseller sales. This is a different version of reseller sales. In this, I have imported salesperson, calendar, and product. So the same dimensions inside the core dimensions model has been imported into each of these three models, right? Much like what I showed, what I had planned for in this, right? So date, salesperson, and product have been put into a separate model, and I have pulled them into the core models that I want. Right? So now it's just a matter of just publishing each of these. So I'll just replace whatever it was there previously with this. That's reseller sales, indicate it's done. Close that. Then internet sales. Okay, that's done. And then finally, finance. It's open twice. Just close the previous instance. Then I'll publish this. Okay. So now if I go to my Power BI service, we have all of these three published. And if I were to go into the lead, okay, let me just get rid of these default reports, that they are empty reports. I don't want them cluttering up my workspace. So if I go to lineage view, right? Let me just get into the gateways and set up the gateways, because it's coming, the source is a SQL database, which is on premises, okay, a data warehouse on premises. So let me just map it to the correct ones. I do that for all of these. Sorry. That's fine. That sales. That's also fine. Finance. And then the core dimensions also. Setting it to my data warehouse. That's also fine. And now if I go into lineage view, you can see, right, all of these. I can move them around, but you can see that each of these are being are pulling information, are pulling data from core dimensions. So the core dimensions are going into each of these, plus there are additional data coming in for the fact tables and so forth from. Okay. So so this way, there is reuse, less clutter, and I'm having a much more cleaner single source of truth. Okay, so that's all I want to show in the demo. Some considerations. This functionality is still in preview, so you need to be cautious when using on production. Not that you cannot use it in production, but if you are trying it out, please do the necessary testing and you can try it out on production. Okay. and things can change. Okay, so sometimes drastically, so you need to be aware of that. And you also need to research and try out your ideas, especially if you want to put up a strategy. Okay, now this is part of strategy, be a strategy. Therefore, there should be a lot of planning. The architecture should be there in the right place, and so you need to try research and try out your ideas, especially after what Asanka did today, right? He spoke about Datamarts. Now, I am thinking that we can use Datamarts in here as part of the core in the future for some of my clients. How do I try that out? Okay. So yeah, there it is. So I'm open to questions now.
Google, there is one question in the chat from Dilum again. He's asking, is it mandatory to have core models and other reports on the same workspace?
Is it mandatory to have core models and other reports? I mean, design-wise, I would prefer to have a workspace just for the core components or the core models in one workspace, and only those who are required to use them will be given access. Reports are ideally separated out in separate workspaces, because reports are of different types for different purposes, different requirements. So it's always best to separate out the reports into their own workspaces depending on the requirements. Hope I answered that question, Dino. Okay, awesome. Anything else? I think we can close up then, Warren.
Yep. For everyone who has joined, I just want to say that we will be having this recording put up on the Power BI community YouTube page. And also want to thank Gogula for his time and for sharing his knowledge with us. And also thank you to everyone for being here. We do apologize for running 10 minutes behind and 10 minutes late. So thank you very much for sticking around, and hope to see you all at the next meetup next year. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.